Welcome to yet another edition of PIX on Pigskin from the PIX 11 Sports Department, still high above 42nd Street in the heart of New York City. I'm your host, Todd Ehrlich, the executive producer of the Sports 11, PIX 11 Sports Department, and the host of this podcast. On today's show, we'd like to give you a little rundown, Joe's idea. The Saints go marching back into the Big Easy to take on Big Blue. The Jets host Derrick Henry, who's a titan of a man, and his guys from Tennessee. The Giants fans booed their owner at halftime. The mayor tried to kick the winning field goal for the Giants, even though it's Atlanta that kicked the winning field goal, with some press box trash cans. Don't think it went well. And a lot to dig into, considering we're covering two winless teams. Let's start with the Giants. So, Giant fans are losing their mind at 0-3 with two losses on last-second field goals. Gary Myers, are they that bad?
The record says they're as bad as any team in the league, and that's basically what you have to go on. But they have played well enough to win the last two games. They were horrible against Denver. They had the game won in Washington until the offsides penalty. And then last week, they let a really putrid Falcons team come back from 7 down in the fourth quarter, drive the field to get the tying touchdown, and then drive the field to get the winning field goal against the quarterback, Matt Ryan, who I definitely think is in his first year of retirement already. He doesn't look like the same player he did the year they went to the Super Bowl, and the Giants really had no excuse, to lose to a Falcons team that really, to me, is going to be fighting for the first pick in the draft.
So in your opinion, he's playing in a rocking chair back there.
Yeah, he doesn't throw deep. He looked to check everything off. And, if you're a Giants fan, the thing I would really worry about now is if you can't beat the Falcons on Eli Manning Day against one of the worst teams in the league, when the fans were just looking for anything to get behind them, and then you blow it by giving up 10 points in the last few minutes of the fourth quarter, and then you look at the schedule coming up. I don't have it memorized, but obviously it starts in New Orleans with Saints getting their first home game after being forced out of New Orleans because of the hurricane. I mean, show me where the victories are here the first half of the season. They're really hard to find.
They're not on paper. Greg Buttle, they play the games on the field. Giant fans are losing.
They're on your paper right here.
They certainly are, but I have a lot of L's. Although I will always pick the Giants and Jets to win, so people continue to listen to the podcast. Greg Buttle, are the Giants that bad?
Of course not. No one's ever that good, or no one's ever that bad. If you watch enough film, you know that, okay, you can fix that mistake. There are things that you're just not going to fix. I mean, there are times where you've got a player that you're down to your third corner, and he's just not a starter. And then the only way to fix that is get another guy. So that being said, no one's ever as bad as they are. And the Giants, everyone is pissing about them because they lost 2 games by a field goal. I mean, the Packers win one by a field goal. I mean, you have the Ravens win one by a field goal. And by the way, I had to set a world's record to do it. And if they lost that game, would everyone be complaining the same way? I happen to see that context is king when it comes to the NFL. Fans forget context because they only listen to what the quotes of the great all world people are. You are as good as your record is, and winning isn't everything; it's the only thing. There's a lot of context in the NFL, and that is players that you think have made a mistake, didn't make the mistake. It was the guy in front of them or behind them. And so until you watch films and you recognize, how hard it is to play this game, they get paid a lot of money. I'm just saying is that nobody is as bad as they look, except maybe the Jets right now, but
we'll get to that.
Nobody as bad as they look.
Do you notice,
we will get to
even
that.
though Greg says almost nothing that I agree with, when he wears those glasses, that people just listening, obviously.
He looks smart.
When he puts the glasses on and has them at the end of his nose, he actually looks intelligent.
Professorial,
Yes.
you
He
might
doesn't
say.
sound
I wouldn't
intelligent.
say that. Joe would.
He doesn't sound intelligent.
No, but he
intelligent.
looks it.
He does.
So we should film this podcast, is what you're saying.
I think
So
so
let me ask
people
a simple
believe it.
question.
Wait,
No,
let me ask a simple question.
No, I'm asking a
Who
simple
at this
question
table has played in the NFL? Greg Buttle. So maybe we should listen to him. Maybe we have to read between the lines because I think there's pearls of wisdom in there.
Well,
That's what I think.
Greg has a great handle on what it means to play on a losing team.
Yes.
So that's why he's like the
Oh,
authority.
wow.
So let me ask the journalist. Let me ask Mr. Journalist a question.
That would be Gary Myers? Or,
That would be Gary
Okay,
Myers.
Gary.
This is fantastic.
Point,
radio
counterpoint.
podcast.
When did you play the
Wherever you're
game?
listening.
How many?
How many games have you played in?
How many? And what are intransitive verbs?
Intransitive verbs?
Yeah.
Well, you got those glasses at the end of your nose, so I know you have the answer to
You're
it.
the journalist that writes, and you need to know what everything
I
about grammar.
always my writing style is I wrote by feel. My grammar, if you want to say was or were, or this, I couldn't tell which word to use until I looked at it, and it just made sense to me. So you're asking me, I couldn't tell you the difference between an adverb and a pronoun, probably, maybe, but I know how to write. So that's the key.
Is, MR, was, were, be, being, and been are the 7 intransitive verbs. But that's just, I'm just saying.
You're just throwing it out there.
I'm just throwing
And you know,
it
there's
out
a
right
bus
there.
down at the quarter of 42nd and second.
right.
That and the $3 or whatever.
We'll
gotta
get
you
you
on
on
the
it.
bus.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
Yeah.
See, but here's what's not fair, Greg, and here's what I don't appreciate. Yes, Gary Myers. So he writes some best-selling books. He's had columns for 40 years, whatever it is. It's something. Meanwhile, you got summa cum laude Joe
No,
and
Magna.
Stanford
Summa there.
and Stanford Andy.
Palo
When you ask
Alto
these
Andy.
two, right? These two would have known the answer.
On the farm.
You picked the wrong guy.
All right, what's a gerund, Andy?
I have no idea.
That's right. What's a gerund, Joe?
It's what I do for my wife. She asked me to run the gerunds for her.
I like that.
Go get the groceries.
Well
the
played.
laundry.
That's pretty good.
So the grammar portion of the
TV right?
podcast is
That's
over.
so
Right.
funny.
All right.
That's
I'm
so
just,
funny.
I'm just curious. We
Well
get to like
played,
throw
Joe.
out like random questions that
We'll
have
talk
nothing
about
to do
past
with
participles
anything.
Yes.
in the next
And in
episode.
this podcast-
If you're still
No, it's
trying.
like, I got to tell you, it's a funny line because I get involved with fans. A lot of my friends are diehard Jet or Giant fans, and they'll come up and ask this question: "What do you think about Daniel Jones?" And I go, "This is what I think about Daniel Jones. He can do this, he can do that. This is what he did. He did bump, 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 and I really like the kid." Really? That's wrong because this is what he does. I go, "Well, wait a second. You just asked
You asked me, right?
what I thought of him, and I'm wrong, and you're right." And I'm going,
How do I feel about it?
where did you get all of this from? And I laugh. I really laugh because I'm not trying to be condescending to them, but they're
It just
trying to ask
happens
someone
naturally
that
for
is
you?
somewhat familiar with the
Thank you,
game
Joe.
and the position. You know, that's all I'm saying.
Just somewhat.
Hold on, I think we've been really rude here.
Who?
There's one lady sitting at the table, and we
Well, my next
have not
question's
given her
for
a
her.
chance to talk.
Well, because she doesn't get in the
Oh,
muck
I mean,
and
come
the
on
mess.
now.
Gary,
She's
you're
a classy lady that's above all of our
Oh,
nonsense.
that goes without saying. That's
Well, I
what-
just thought I
we
would
just
say
need,
it.
we need to
Is it
defer.
okay I
we need
said
to
it?
defer to Andy
I'm
here.
going to. Can I ask the next
She's
question?
too kind to butt in.
Of course she is.
Oh, Gary, you
as
are
I keep
kind.
cutting you off. So I'm going to ask Andy. Andy, the Giants could easily be 2-1. If they were 2-1, how completely differently would we be looking at this team, this season, this matchup in New Orleans?
It would be a completely different situation, but at the same time, they're not 2-1. And I feel like, contrary to Greg Buttle's belief that Greg just gave me a
Wins and
look, like,
losses don't matter.
that wins and losses don't matter. That's the only thing that matters, and you know that. And I feel like, despite the fact that 0-3 doesn't tell the story of the Giants in the situation, yes, the last 2 games came down to the final play. I do think that ultimately it does come down to the fact this is an 0-3 team, period. And by the way, thanks, Gary.
By the way, thank you, Gary. Joe, your thoughts?
So, yes, I think we would be looking at this differently if they were 2-1, but we would be saying that this game in New Orleans is a measuring stick game because they haven't played teams that are expected to do anything. Sorry to your Washington football team.
who will just
So-
sweep Dallas again like they did
And
last
listen,
year.
and I think
I just
Denver's
break
going
that
to
down.
play well. Obviously, I said in week 1 that I think Denver's going to have a great year. But I'm
Well,
going to
hold
agree.
on.
Whoa, do you have
Denver is
receipts? We keep
3-0.
receipts.
Denver is 3-0
Yeah.
against teams that are combined 0-9.
And what are we
Yeah,
going to?
but two of them are our team.
Right,
that we
they stink.
cover.
And what?
Okay,
Right.
good.
And what are we going to say
Keep-
about Denver?
Keep listening, everybody.
They have a measuring stick game, right, coming up. So we're going to see how they play. But we're not in Denver, so let's talk about the New York teams here. I agree with Greg Buttle that context matters. Right?
You're the one.
Context matters. And yes, they have lost, but they lost to teams that aren't going to have good records, the majority of them, at the end of the season here. And the one team that I think will, they got blown out by. The other thing that I think you need to look at is a wise man once said that the NFL is set up to go 500. Everybody should be able to go 500. But injuries come into play. The Giants are injured right now. They're missing 2 of their top wide receivers. They lost their middle linebacker, who was a huge change. And we talked about their offensive line.
It's an injury
Next
league.
man up.
Yeah.
Next man up, Joe.
Context is king. Of all these people that have played in the NFL, they would know that, especially Gary Myers.
Can I add a little
Greg Buttle is
context?
king at this table.
I'll add a little context. The season is only going to get more difficult. The schedule only gets more difficult. So, context.
So
by the
true.
way, what's a
You know what the final record is of
by
every
the
team in
way?
the NFL?
What is a Jared?
Yeah,
Think
Andy
Tampa Bay is
does.
going to be in the Super Bowl again?
What's that?
Well, I don't know.
That's
If
what I'm
you know
saying.
that,
So
I'd like to.
nobody
go to
knows.
Caesars.
Nobody knows. The Jets could go on a roll and win 5 games, or the Giants could. And you'd sit there and you go, boy, I could have seen that coming. But nobody does, because when you prognosticate in NFL games, you really go out there and saying things that no one knows. You may have an inkling, okay, listen, the Titans can beat the Jets or the Saints can beat the Giants. But on any given day, we do know that just, it may not happen like that. And you sit around there in awe and in wonder and go, how did that happen? No one has an answer for that. The Jets can play as well as any team at any given time.
Like
They
the
may
Jets
not be-
beating the Rams last year.
Correct. They may not be able to do it for every game
For their first one.
because they're not that good. They're not that experienced. They're going to make mistakes. The Giants will make some mistakes. And I wanted to get back into one other thing too about the Giants being 2-1. Giants being 0-3 instead of 2-1. No, and that is, I've always been amazed at coaches and play calling. Everybody believes play calling is so important, and I think it is overrated. Why? Because Bill Parcells is going to say, I called the play, you didn't block it right. Now, every play I call is a successful play, and then all of a sudden it doesn't make it. And everybody on that offensive line knows that was the wrong play. It was the wrong play. They blitzed in the hole. There's nothing you can do about it. But every coach is going to say, every play that I draw up is supposed to work. And so when you think about that, you look at offensive play calling, you look at things and you go, to me, how aggressive are you in these situations? Are you putting your team in the best play that you could possibly put them into this time? Or are you scared that your quarterback's going to throw an interception? Or are you scared that your defense can't do this, and so you're going to call this defensive play? And then what happens? Everybody that's in the football-eating world is watching the game going, Kansas City's coming back because that guy's going to throw the ball all over the place, and Andy Reid's going to call pass plays. He's not going to run the ball. I mean, he's down by 5, he's going to throw the ball. He's up by 3, he's throwing the ball. He's doing all these things. So when you get into context, and this is my point about context, is that there's a lot to a game that goes into it. And it's not just the players that make mistakes, it's the coaches that don't take advantage of what their players do the best. Or they're going to say, I'm playing the odds. I'm going to punt the ball here. Meanwhile, they lose the game and everyone goes, you see, I would have run for it. I would have gone for it on 4th down.
Hindsight's 2020.
So my point is as we talk about this, I've heard this for 40 years. And I sit around and go, it's never changed. It's never changed. No matter who's playing, no matter when they're doing, it's the same thing. Every single year we sit around and we talk about how good that team is or
And
how
it's
poor that guy is.
fantastic. And we
Isn't
love every minute of it.
second of it.
That's my point.
Yeah.
But fans don't.
Yeah.
Because 0-3, they're terrible. Oh my God. I used to listen to Don LaGreca before a Giant game.
Donnie Pucks.
Oh my God. He was a huge Giant fan. And he'd say, they're going to fumble the ball. Oh, they're going to throw an interception. You know what I'm saying? And as a fan, it's like, you see, I told you. I told you. And I laugh because, you know what? A lot of times fans are right. Only because from their experience over the years, it's happened numerous times. Jet fans, Giant fans, or whatever it may be. Unfortunately, the New England Patriot fans are just learning that it ain't that easy to win a football game.
Yeah.
But anyway, that being said, That's what I'm talking about context. There's a lot that goes on that field that no one has control over. The players don't even have control.
Yeah, but, I don't disagree with anything you just said, except ultimately, all that counts.
Professional football, I get it. Wins and losses. I get that. I do get it. And then, by the way, every player knows that.
And you can make excuses or give rational explanations for any loss by any team. If this guy didn't miss this block, it was going for 80 yards. Instead, it was a 2-yard loss. If he just made that block, well, maybe it wasn't good enough to make the block. Or you can just make a laundry list of things after a game and say, well, if we did this or this, we would have won the game. Well, the reason you didn't win the game is because you're not good enough, and that's why you're 0-3. So forget about excuses.
Or the clock ran out, because I've heard that one a lot, too.
If
We would have won that. The clock just
game
ran out.
was only 59 minutes. The Giants would be 2-1.
61.
All that matters right now is not that the Giants came close the last 2 weeks. It's that the Giants weren't good enough to finish off two pretty bad football teams. Sorry about your Washington team.
I am sorry about that, too.
But they are a bad team. And
without a nickname.
Right, and if the Giants were good enough, they would have won both those games. They weren't good enough, and they lost them because they're not a good team. So the 0-3 record is probably pretty indicative of what kind of team this is. Otherwise, they would have found a way to make a stop in Washington. They would have stopped the Falcons sometime in the fourth quarter. These are not the Chiefs' offense, the Rams' offense, the Bucs' offense, even the Cowboys' offense. I mean, these were two mediocre teams at best that imposed their will on the Giants in the fourth quarter and won the game because the Giants aren't any good.
Well, here's the thing about Washington. In Washington, let's not forget, they made the play they needed to make. James Bradbury came up with the huge interception. They were trailing the game at that time, right? So they made that play to get them over the hump. Then, not only did they not make the play, they made mistakes on that final drive. They had 2 penalties before the crucial penalty that led to the missed field goal being a made field goal. So it's not just one play, it's the plays throughout the game that all add up.
I love the point. I'm going to take us back to the Patriots Saints game last weekend, right? Okay, 2 plays in the game. Mac Jones sits there, and he sits in the pocket, and he hits a little crossing, a 4-yard crosser. He hits the player in the hands. The ball pops up,
Smith,
interception, touchdown.
Right.
Yep. Jameis Winston is getting sacked. He's almost on his back.
Yep.
He throws it up in the air.
Yep.
And
back of the end
the
zone.
one guy that was knocked down on the ground gets up, and it's a jump ball. He jumps up, catches the ball, touchdown. You've got to be kidding me. And when I say context, I'm going, you can't make that stuff up. The ball bounces so weird, it's unbelievable. P.S. Giants are 0-3. Patriots are 1-2. And that's the name of the game.
And some teams are built...
For what it's worth, Winston threw that ball because there was a penalty. So he knew even if it was intercepted, that the play was coming back. So he threw up a jump ball.
Are you sure he knew that?
Yes. I spoke to him about it. Andy gave me his number.
I want to hear
It's what he
tape.
said in the post-game
I gotta
press
tell you
conference. I
something.
read it.
They
That's
shared crab
fake
legs.
news.
Me and James aren't tight, but I did read it. I did read it.
You
And he
believe
said,
everything you read.
I do believe everything I read that Gary writes.
Still, the fact remains, his guy caught the ball.
But here's the thing.
Yes,
Some
an
teams...
insane catch.
Go ahead, Andy.
Doesn't it ask, like, it begs the question, is it better to be lucky or good? And I feel like exactly. And I feel like when it comes to football, and Gary, you could attest to this, it's a combination of both. Of Greg.
They look alike.
By the way, Gary just rolled his eyes when you said look alike.
And Greg did also.
like you like the vibe I got from Gary was like he's so insulted, and Greg, you're like I don't think you enjoyed it.
Anyway.
But I mean, that's the thing. I think like as a player, having been out there, you know that it's that combination that ultimately ends up with W's or not.
I agree, and that's why I've said many times that wonderful quote that everyone should be 500. I'll tell you why. Because you're going to win 4 games. You're going to win 4 games. It's the way it works. You're going to play in 4 games where somebody kicks a field goal at the end and beats you. And you're going to play in 2 to beat the other team. So you're going to get 2 victories and 2 losses. And the ball bounces a weird way. And how many times do you see a Hail Mary and your team catches it and you sit there and you go, How do they allow this to happen? How does that defense allow that stupid play to unfold and happen? And it happens. And so the bounce of the ball in the NFL is, I'm telling you, I think even more improbable than the bounce of a ball in golf. I mean,
well, it's a different shape. The ball in golf is round,
true.
the oblong, and
Are you going to physics now, right? We've got physics going here?
Not yet,
so
no.
That's what I want. I want to hear Greg talk about physics. That's where we should go.
Well, seriously, when you're talking about physics and you're talking about...
but the glasses are coming back on.
Velocity equals
Podcast is off the rails.
Yeah, force equals mass times acceleration.
Time over acceleration. Force equals velocity times acceleration. That's why you don't want to hit a bridge abutment.
There you go. But no, I want to go back for a second because we're talking about these mistakes or these lucky bounces. The best teams in a given year, though, will overcome in some of those games where things don't go their way. For example, you mentioned the Baltimore Ravens, who needed a 66-yard field goal in order to win that. That game, Hollywood Brown dropped 2 passes that would have been sure touchdowns that literally were in his hands. And so they had to overcome that against Detroit. And that's the difference between a good team and a bad team. Detroit had the ball bounce their way in that game and still couldn't get the W. Baltimore, the ball bounced opposite them, and they still managed to come away with win. And that's the difference when we're talking about splitting hairs, which is the difference in an NFL season.
World record 66-yard field goal
But he hit
that
it.
bounces off the upright and goes over. And you're saying Detroit didn't deserve to win the game?
because on the play before the play before that, they had a 4th and 19 at where Baltimore was on their own, I think, 15-yard line,
Right,
that they give up a huge pass to Mark Andrews. So it's not, even to get to that position, it's all of these things that add up. And you're going to have the ball bounce your way sometimes,
That's right. Well,
and not others.
I agree with that.
Yeah. And the best teams will overcome in a couple of those games.
The good things tend to happen to the good teams, and the bad things happen to the bad teams.
Especially penalties. Did you ever notice that?
Yeah.
Oh, the good teams never hold. They just don't do it the same way. They don't pass it.
They don't get
How many
caught.
times did Belichick's teams ever get caught passing interference? Rarely.
And how many times did the other defense get roughing the passer on Brady?
All the time. All the time.
Right.
I got to tell you. Anyway, the rules are a little weird, but that's beside the point.
Okay,
So, thank you. Thank you, Gary. So the Superdome is open for business. It's been deemed safe after Hurricane Ida, small fire on the roof. It's open for fans for the first time since 2019. It's notoriously a tough place to play and a loud place. So I'd like to ask the one person that's actually played football. Fans are always like, it's so loud there, it's so hard. What is the difference playing in a loud stadium like a dome, and is it really that big of an advantage when you have things like silent counts?
I will tell you, the only thing that I can tell you is I've never had a problem playing in any stadium. I don't care what stadium it was.
You probably thrive on that noise, by the way. I feel like you would.
Well, the thing is when you get there, you are really in a little microcosm right in there. You're on the field. You can hear everything the quarterback's saying, et cetera, et cetera. The only problem is that there's a communication issue by quarterback to lineman. And sometimes if the quarterback turns his head and yells it over there, the linemen on the right side or the opposite side aren't going to hear him. And that's why you get some miscommunications. But other than that, never had a problem hearing anything the quarterback was saying from my side of the field. Or on defense, we never had a problem communicating because it was too loud. That being said, the loudest stadium ever played in, open air stadium, Buffalo Bills.
Wow.
It was
Let's go Buffalo.
Ralph Wilson was
Ralph
there?
Wilson Stadium. Unbelievable.
Wow. Interesting.
I think that's probably been overtaken as an outdoor stadium in Seattle because of the way, if you've seen the stands up there kind of curl
They
over.
also pumping music there, and they've got busted for that.
Yeah. The Superdome, in the heyday of the Drew Brees stuff, I mean, that really, really got loud. I think the biggest negative is for the opposing offense. I don't think it affects the defense all that much. It's the opposing offense trying to call signals. I was at a Giant game in Seattle. I'm trying to remember. I think they had double-digit false starts in a game in Seattle. If it wasn't that, it was 8. I mean, it was really a lot of false starts because they just couldn't hear. anything. And I don't know why they weren't using the silent count. Maybe they were, but I think it can definitely have an impact on the game. And the fact that the Saint fans lost their first home game because they had to be played in Jacksonville, and they weren't there for the playoff game that they lost to the Bucs last year, and that might have been different if it was a full house in the Super Bowl instead of a completely empty stadium. I think they're going to be really geared up, and I don't think the Saints are great by any means, but I don't know that the Giants are good enough to withstand all the kind of the intangible factors in this game with the crowd and the noise and the Saints being excited to play their first game at home.
So no Drew Brees, good news. But Jameis Winston last
Is it?
week, I think so. Yeah, he was a decent quarterback. He's
But at
no
the end,
Sonny
he had a tough
Jurgens
time
said,
stretching the field.
but he was a decent quarterback. Well, can we argue that he wasn't a good?
Well, they're better off playing
quarterback?
Jameis Winston than they were Drew Brees 5 years ago. Let's put it like that.
Oh,
But
absolutely
even
not.
Drew Brees, last year I would go Drew Brees being you wouldn't put Drew Brees above Winston
Well, Drew had trouble throwing the ball last year.
last year.
And he's been
but-
hurt the last 2 years.
So if we give him a pass, okay. So last year, no. But what about prior? I mean, you can't
Sean
say,
Payton clearly disagrees with you.
You can't say
Right. Because Drew Brees started last year. He wants to win, right?
Yeah, but I think
I
that's
can't even get out. I mean,
Okay.
Drew Brees is going to the Hall of Fame.
Brees. and
He's
how do
won
you
a
say that
Super
about
Bowl.
Brees?
I can't even say no Drew Brees.
Brees is
Good
a
news.
Hall of Fame.
Jameis Winston without Gary
My
Harkin.
God,
Great.
Tom.
But nevertheless, can I just say,
Yeah, go ahead.
Jameis Winston's been up and down this year, but he's coming off of a good game, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. They played 2 quarterbacks, one of which is retired, but Gary has not gotten to Matt Ryan to tell him he's retired. And Tyler Heineke, who last year was studying math with Greg Buttle in November before he got called up. So the question is, the Saints' offensive line has allowed 7 sacks in the last 2 games. The Giants have only been able to manage 3 sacks this year with, 3 sacks last week with 6 quarterback hits. Do they have enough to rattle Jameis Winston and try to eke out a win?
No, absolutely not.
Uh,
The defense
we're
is-
trying to give people hope.
I understand that. You want a bright spot? Azeez Ojulari, the rookie defensive end, has 3 sacks for the Giants. He's looked good.
That's
He's tough.
good.
But outside of
Way to
that,
go,
they
Joe.
haven't been able to do anything on defense. And when you look at the defenses that the Saints have had to play recently in New England, and I believe Carolina was their game previous to that, they have dominant defenses and defensive lines that are able to put pressure on the quarterback. The Giants haven't shown that they can do that in their last 2 games against subpar teams. Offensive line. I mean, the Bills, Washington didn't do much against the Bills. So all I'm saying is that I can't see them going down to New Orleans and all of a sudden changing that overnight, especially you don't have Blake Martinez there.
Right, that's a big injury. All right, so let's go with predictions and move on to Buttles. Jets. Greg, who's going to win the Giants-Saints game?
You have to
I
pick
would-
the same team that you picked on the show. You can't have it both ways.
Okay, so I would tell you that I think
It's a fair point.
the way the Giants are going to win is not because of their offense, but because of the mistakes the Saints' offense would make. I think that's the only way they win. Jameis Winston has to help them win the game.
Joe?
I think the Giants get blown out here. The roof comes off the Superdome. I'm going 38-17 Saints.
Ouch. Gary?
Let's not forget that the last time that Jameis Winston started a whole season, he had 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions. So he's just as capable of throwing it to the other team as he is to his own. Although you figure that the year being an apprentice to Drew Brees has taught him a few things.
Was he a decent quarterback,
I
Drew
was just
Brees?
gonna, you just took the
He
words out of my
was.
mouth.
He was a decent
decent.
quarterback.
He was a great quarterback. He was a Hall of
He
Fame
was a
quarterback.
great quarterback. Okay,
But not
good.
last year.
But no Sonny Jurgens.
Not last year. He wasn't a great quarterback last year.
Well, he got crushed last year too. He's physically beat up last
Yeah.
year.
Yeah,
Physically.
absolutely.
I agree. But I don't think Gary's saying he's not Hall of Fame.
No, he wasn't Hall of Fame last year. Otherwise, he would have been playing this year.
Andy?
Saints are gonna win by 3.
I got the Giants
Another
winning this
3-point
game.
run.
Big upset. The Giants are going to win. We'll be back next week. Giant fans, tune in. So, Gary Myers, I was watching the Jets-Bronco game. Have they scored yet? The Jets, as they got on the scoreboard yet?
No. What's that old joke? That the other team took the defense off the field, and 10 plays later, the Jets scored.
I like it.
I like that too. So,
sorry, Greg.
I'm not offended.
So Andy, what can be done to fix this Jets offense and get some points this week, for goodness sakes?
I mean, at this point, we're watching a team that is just inept, and I feel like when we look at it's everything from the offense to the defense, the entire situation here. I mean, Gary, you're making hand gestures.
No, because Greg is banging the table.
Oh, he's excited.
Emphatic, yeah.
He's
like, I love that point by Andy.
Thank you for that.
Pounds the fist.
Thank you for that. I think ultimately this is something where it starts from the very top to what we're seeing on the field. So, Gary.
I just want to say it's a good thing this glass table was not in John Mara's box last week.
Oof,
right? It was
he
just
would have
garbage
kicked
cans.
it over, yes. So, Greg Buttle, how important is experience? So, the Jets, they draft their quarterback of the future, and they surround him with a rookie head coach, rookie offensive coordinator, and he's a rookie. Is it a mistake not to have somebody, a Joe Flacco, a Drew Brees, a Sonny Jurgensen, somebody from to be able to bounce ideas off of?
If he's bouncing ideas off Sonny Jurgensen, that's impressive.
Bobby Lane, maybe.
Yeah.
Sonny Jurgensen's alive.
But
Please be nice.
All I can tell you is that I think that just saying a player that is played can help him out is not sufficient enough. He's got to have coaching. And it's not a player. Some players can't coach. And some players won't coach. Brett Favre wasn't going to coach that backup quarterback. Brett Favre was going to tell him. Aaron Rodgers
that backup quarterback.
That guy was never going to be anything anyway.
Well,
Aaron Rodgers. Was he okay, Gary?
Very good.
I just checked.
But all I'm saying is that I don't think Joe Flacco had a lot of talk for Sam Darnold. I mean, that didn't work out too well. But so it's not about that. It's more about, do you have a coach that has an understanding of what the quarterback can do, what he can't do, and how I can make him better? I will give you a perfect example. When I was drafted by the Jets, Walt Michaels was the linebacker coach. I am a Walt Michaels fan because people don't recognize how intelligent the guy was. He knew everything about football. He knew X's and O's. He knew how to play the game. And it hasn't changed. The game hasn't changed how to play it. So if you can get a guy like that, luckily for me, I got him my rookie year. He taught me how to play linebacker. I came from Penn State, linebacker U. It was nothing compared to what I learned from Walt Michaels in 6 weeks of preseason camp, sitting with him every single day talking about stuff. When you get on the field, you got to do it. He's not helping me on the field. So there's not a player standing on the sidelines going to say, hey, you threw that. He can't see anything. It's a big misnomer. You can't see anything out on the field. You got to be up in the press box and looking down and watching him exactly every single movement of that play to be able to tell him, oh, you took that wrong step, you did that. You can only do that in films. So as far as a veteran player assisting someone through a game, it's nonsense. There's times where, sure, there might be something that you can impart to him, but everyone's played. You're going to tell me that, let's just say, for instance, let me think of one. Let's take Sonny Jurgensen. Sonny Jurgensen's going to be able to tell Mahomes what he's doing right or wrong. Hell, that guy does what he does because he's Mahomes.
Yeah.
Just like Tom Brady does what he does because he's Tom Brady. And Tom Brady with an offensive line is awesome. Tom Brady behind another offensive line is going to get broken in half. So a lot of times you get information from players that have been in a different position. And there are some players that are just...
They're different skill sets.
Awesome. I mean, Lawrence Taylor was a different player. He was a GOAT.
He was no Greg Buttle.
But he couldn't tell you how to rush the passer. that stuff was all innate and for him. That he was awesome.
I think you're completely missing the point here.
No, I'm not.
And I'm not talking about sitting with a guy on the bench on Sundays. I'm talking about Monday through Saturday. And I think there's a lot to be gained by the quarterback sitting around and discussing things when the coaches aren't there. And all Zach Wilson has to rely on is a guy named Mike White, who has not taken a snap in the NFL, and Josh Johnson, who literally has been with about 10 teams and probably hasn't won more than 2 or 3 games as a starter. So he can't even say, when I beat the Cowboys, this is what we did, or when I had success in the league, this is what we did. Josh McCown didn't have a lot of success, but Josh McCown had the aura about him of being like a player coach. And I think he was really helpful to Sam. And when he wasn't there for Sam's second year, I thought that really hurt him.
But in this day and age, aren't these guys getting that elsewhere? I think Wilson went to the quarterback camp with John Beck, where he's also training
Joe,
with Mahomes.
That doesn't matter. We're talking about when the season starts and you're sitting in there.
But you don't think he's still making phone calls to those people?
He's not sitting with them watching film. He's not sitting with them watching the game film.
Let's just stop for a second. Stop. They watch film all off season. So that's nonsense. They watch film all the time.
With the game plan for this week's game. I'm listening.
You got to have somebody.
I don't need to know the game plan of whether you played well or badly. It's the game plan is superfluous to that. When you get on those films and you watch those films, you know that he took 7 steps. It's a 5-step drop. I mean that Oh, wait a second. He didn't step up. He had outside pressure. You got to step up. Okay. Did you see the pressure? That I can understand. But you're going to go watch through films. But I got to tell you something. A coach can tell him that. Now, maybe the quarterback is going to sit there and say to him, listen, I know there's going to be pressure from the left side because when I come up and we call line strength, I'm responsible for that guy and the running back is for this guy. So I can understand that coaches can tell you these things. Now, how good is that coach in explaining how not to do it? That's the question. There are quarterbacks that played that can't tell you how not to do that. All I'm saying is that I think it's overblown, that point about having that experienced guy sitting there talking into your ear. That's all I'm saying.
Well, why do you think it's a rarity, maybe 2 or 3 times in the last 20 years, that a team has had as little experience a quarterback as the Jets have had, where they don't have a guy in the active roster going into the season opener who took a snap at quarterback in the NFL. That just doesn't happen. And there's a reason it doesn't happen, is because it's counterproductive. I think a guy like Nick Foles would have been the perfect one to sit in that room with Zach Wilson. He's a Super Bowl MVP. He doesn't have a huge ego. He's always been known as a good teammate. In a situation like this, although I wouldn't be advocating that Zach sits down for a couple of weeks by any means, but maybe in a game like Denver last week when he was getting the crap kicked out of him, that you sit him down with 7 minutes to go in the game, you put in Nick Foles.
You stop the bleeding.
Right, exactly. And you try to save the guy mentally a little bit. What are the Jets going to do? Put in Mike White, who probably can't break a huddle? I mean, you can't do that. I think the Jets are really running the risk here of potentially ruining Zach Wilson, averaging 5 sacks a week, 17 games, that's 85 sacks. David Carr, as I mentioned on the show this week, 76 sacks, an NFL record as a rookie, and he was playing for an expansion team. And he was never the same after that. I think the first and third most sacked quarterbacks in NFL history are David Carr in his rookie year and David Carr in his third year. He was the first overall pick in the draft. So I think it's really important how the Jets are handling Wilson here and making sure he doesn't get psychologically damaged. He seems like he's a strong-minded kid. He's a smart kid. He works hard. But he's getting the crap kicked out of him, and there's got to be a way to stop the bleeding, even if it's just in the fourth quarter of a game, and the Jets don't have that now. And I think he would have benefited so much by not only having a guy like Nick Foles to sit on the bench with during the game or stand on the sidelines with, but to have him in those meetings during the week. I just think having basically 2 rookies sitting in the quarterback room and Josh Johnson, who's been on 1,000 teams, I don't think that was a great formula there.
I want to say one thing just to build on what you said. the idea of having a quarterback room that had no experience on an NFL roster. I think the last time that it happened, it was two teams that didn't. I couldn't find the year. I was trying to look it up. But one of the teams that did it then was also the New York Jets.
Yeah.
So it's not the first time they've done this.
And in Greg's, you're saying about Greg Knapp, I think we've mentioned it on the podcast so far, or at least on the show, that he wasn't the quarterback coach. He wasn't the wide receiver coach. He wasn't the offensive coordinator. He was going to be Zach Wilson's coach. Mm-hmm. And he had a great track record of working with quarterbacks. And it was such an unfortunate, tragic accident. A week before training camp, he's riding his bicycle, gets hit by a car, and he passes away. Obviously, the most important thing there is a man has lost his life, a family has lost a father and a husband, and all that. But from strictly a football point of view, that was a crucial loss for the Jets and Zach Wilson, because Greg had been working with Zach up until that point. They had gotten used to being together, and he was going to be such a benefit to him, walking him through this rookie season. Now, they brought in Matt Cavanaugh, who's had a similar role, and he used to be with the Jets as a quarterback coach. He's just not as good as Greg Knapp. If he was as good or better than Greg Knapp, he would have been hired instead of him. So I think there's a lot of factors that have worked against Wilson so far, and I just think the Jets really have to be careful with him.
So another factor that's worked against him, I think, sits in Joe Douglas's lap. Zach has thrown 2 touchdowns and 7 interceptions this year, but as we discussed, he's been sacked 15 times. I don't think Douglas has put together an offensive line that protects him and gives us a chance to really fairly evaluate him. Andy?
I totally agree, and I think that just to go with that in terms of just your first point, there's not enough experience in that locker room, period. Not just from a quarterback perspective, but let's say you bring in a guy like Foles who doesn't have an ego, who can just be there, because the lack of ego, that's crucial there. You can't have a guy who's the backup quarterback with experience who's an ego situation where he's looking at Zach hoping he fails. No, he's there to guide Zach. And also from a coach perspective, there's not enough experience. So ultimately, it all comes together to not be able to get the W in the end.
Okay. So let's try to be a smidge optimistic, if at all possible. Derrick Henry's coming in. That's not optimistic. Last week for 28 carries, 113 yards. Jets defense has been pretty good, only giving up 3.3 yards on the rush. Ryan Tannehill, last week versus the Colts, threw for almost 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, but did have 2 interceptions, and they did fumble the ball once. Is there a chance that the Jets defense can save the game, win the game, maybe even score, since the Jets offense haven't scored, and they can win 6-0? Greg Buttle?
Absolutely not. Doesn't exist.
That was my best shot.
Doesn't exist. But let me just talk about the running game for a second. The Jets won't lose the game because of the running game against them. They'll lose the game through the air. And the answer is that that's how they've lost it in the first 3 games, is through the air. The Jets' red zone defense is pretty good. You can't be good in the red zone unless you can stop the run in the red zone. So they're pretty good at that. Does that mean that Henry's not going to run for 200 yards? I don't know. But again, I don't care. If I'm a defender, I'm going, run the ball. I'll just run the ball. All our inexperience is in the secondary. Just run the ball. May is down. Starting safety's out. You got young quarterbacks. I got 2 safeties that were playing linebacker. Now they're going to have to go revert back to safety. We got issues in pass defense. What am I going to blitz all day? Well, how am I going to do it? Well, I got to tell you, you can run blitz on action, and what that creates half the field, and the quarterback has to figure out which half he is going to play zone and which half is going to play man. And so a lot of things can go into happening that could work into the Jets' advantage if, in fact, they can do these certain things, and they have the players that are able to do it. Now, of course, at linebacker, they have a pretty good player in Mosley. He's pretty good. and he's learned how to play in space a little, because that's not what he did before at middle. He's now playing outside linebacker. So a lot of things are happening out there. And it's not that Tennessee can walk on the field and win. I don't believe that. So the Jets aren't that bad. It's just that they've got to not turn the ball over, the Titans, and they've got to be consistent. They've got to let the Jets make all the mistakes. Because if they make 2 or 3 mistakes in a game, they're not that good. The Tennessee Titans aren't that good to overcome 3 mistakes. So my thing is, anything can happen in a game, but the Jets defense, only because of a couple injuries, are down. But I don't know what they're going to do against them. But if I'm on defense, I hope they're running heavy.
The Jets are catching Tennessee at the right time. So you said Tennessee's not good enough to overcome mistakes. I beg to differ because, as Todd just mentioned, they had 3 turnovers last week and managed to overcome that. 2 of them were in the red zone going in for touchdowns against the Indianapolis Colts. However, they could be missing both A.J. Brown and Julio Jones on this. So you talk about the inexperience in the Jets secondary. They have inexperience at the wide receiver position, which then maybe becomes a wash. So if you can stop Derrick Henry and focus on him now because you don't have those 2 stud wide receivers, that puts a lot of pressure on Ryan Tannehill to take over and win the game. And I'm not sure he can do that yet. And again, on the other side of the ball, the Jets have faced some very tough defenses this year. We've seen it in Carolina, seen it in New England, and obviously Denver. I think this is the worst defense that they'll play so far this season. I think the Jets are going to score some points this weekend and finally give fans something to cheer about.
Better than last weekend. So, very quick question, second to last question, or last question before the prediction. Is this Jets team worse than last year, who went on a historic losing streak before they played the Rams, Andy?
Gosh, I want to say, I'm going to say positive on this. No, they're not worse than last year. There's still some hope here. Zach is still trying to get his legs going. He's trying to be more than just a rookie. We give him a little bit of grace because he is just a rookie. And no, there's room for growth here.
Gary?
Well, right now I think they're worse than they were last year after 3 games, as hard as that is believed. But, the same 0-3 record. The difference here is there was no hope for last year's Jets team. That horrible coach. People were really down on Sam. Change of scenery, obviously, has done him good. Mm-hmm. At least now I think there's hope because we see enough good things in Zach Wilson, not often enough, but enough good things to think, in the right circumstances, if they don't ruin him, I think he has a chance to be a really good quarterback. And I do like Robert Saleh. I'm not crazy about some of the rationalizations that are coming out so far, but he's just trying to keep the team together and not lose them after 3 weeks. So I think this is a better long-term situation for the Jets, certainly, than it was last year. Short-term, last year's team was horrible. So far this year's team is horrible. The only thing that's changed is the coach and the quarterback, but basically the results are the same.
Joe?
As Ted Lasso fans know, it's the hope that'll kill you. So I think hope for this year for Jets fans is kind of, it's not the best thing. But I do think that they're setting the foundation. I think they're better than last year. I think C.J. Mosley being out there alone makes them a better team on the defensive end than last year. Another year for Quinnen Williams. They haven't seen the results yet, but again, I think they faced a tough schedule up front. I think when we look back at this year compared to last year, it will be definitive that this team was a better team than last year's team.
I'm going to regret saying this, I know. I know I am. I agree with Gary Myers.
Wow!
It was a very good evaluation, Gary. It was well thought out. It was terse, and it was to the point. And I think that's about what it is. They aren't what last year's team is. And certainly halfway through the year, they're not going to be there because this team wants to play for this coach. So a big difference.
All right, prediction time, Greg.
Can we write down the time, the date, time? And
Joe keeps all receipts. Yes,
Okay.
Joe's got it.
See, already I'm regretting it.
I know, but it always makes you feel good when he agrees with me.
Well, it's only happened once.
Right,
It just
so-
happened now.
But outside
So
of
not
something,
always. You feel good now.
No, he said beforehand that he agreed with me that the bagels you brought in were good.
Oh,
There we
thank
go.
you, Greg. I appreciate
but
that.
going forward, I mean, I think it's a tough game for them. I think it's a tough game because they haven't figured out what they are offensively yet, and that's a problem because they haven't scored 7 points a game. How are they going to score 25? So I think this week may be a tough loss week, only because they don't know. And so I don't know. I don't think they beat the Titans this week.
If Tennessee doesn't have their 2 wide receivers, I think the Jets pull off the upset at home. I think 21-17 defense keeps them in this as they have all season. I think they limit their mistakes, and I think Corey Davis has a big game going against his former team in the Titans.
You think that? Well, let me ask you this, Joe. What is a bigger reunion game this weekend?
There's no question. I know where you're going. Corey Davis playing against Tennessee is not the biggest reunion game on the calendar this week. It's a shame they put them both on the same weekend.
I think any tickets the Jets have left for Sunday, you can just say, hey,
The Davis
come watch
family.
Corey Davis be motivated to play against a team that dumped him. No, I don't think they can win this game because I saw what Damian Harris did to the Jets a couple weeks ago, dragging about 5 guys into the end zone. And I can only imagine what Derrick Henry is going to do, regardless of whether the Titans have their wide receivers. Now, I know you can bring 12, 15, maybe 18 guys in the box to try to stop him, and they still wouldn't stop him. So I think the Titans, but I think it's going to be kind of a low-scoring game. We know at least on one end it's going to be low scoring.
You got a score?
I'd say something like 17-7, 17-10, something like that.
Andy?
I'm going to say it's going to be better than last week. How about that? You like positive? I like positive. We're going positive. It will be better than last week, which is not saying much.
Does it
Just
sound-
glass half full kind of gal.
That's right. That is right.
Which we all appreciate. So I think that my prediction will be better than Joe's. I got the Jets 21-16. The
Okay.
defense hold them to 1 point less. Jets get the win. All of a sudden, with my predictions of Jets and Giants winning, this podcast is going to blow up next week as people are dying to tune in to listen to the positivity. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the games. Thank you for listening to PIX on Pigskin. For the legendary Greg Buttle, Joe Massari, best-selling author Gary Myers, Andy Adler, I'm Todd Ehrlich. Thank you very much for listening.
Forgot to tell him to watch the New York Blitz on Sunday.
Watch the New York Blitz on Sunday.
Watch the New York
And
Blitz on
Sports Nation Sunday night.